Welcome to the Boneyard with Steve Robertson. As always, I am your good friend and host, Steve Robertson, here on the midweek edition of the Yard. We'll be back tomorrow before I leave for Charlotte. Of course, latest news, too. Mississippi State going to wear the all blacked out uniforms with the interlocking MSU logo on the helmet. Let me just tell you, I am completely in agreement. I know many of you are like, Steve, I'm more of a traditionalist. I understand that too, and I am at times, right? But I love the blacked out uniform. I think we play well in the blacked out uniform. I think the black uniforms that we have this year are absolutely sick. And I love the fact that we're doing the interlocking. It's the first time we've done that. Yeah, so excited about that. And I think, too, it's one of those things that goes back to kind of a player comfort type thing, right? When you begin to think about the young athlete of today, and it really kind of predates even the NIL era. When you look good, you feel good, you typically play good, right? And so I like the fact that the players have some input in this. We wore those uniforms earlier this year, and they were great. We didn't have the interlocking MSU, so a little history in that respect. For the first time ever, Mississippi State will wear the interlocking black helmet. So I like that aspect of it. Mississippi State social media platforms have pushed out a video of Camario Taylor, and I love the fact that we're showcasing Camario and not just, like a staffer. You know what I mean? Let's make this about Camario in the future and Fluff and those guys, and let's go win a ball game and get a little lift heading into the portal season. As you guys know, the portal opens the morning of our game, and as Jeff Levy confirmed, our earlier report, Mississippi State going to have recruiting staffers stay back in Starkville to attack the portal head on, while the necessary and essential staff will be in Charlotte helping navigate the bowl game over Wake Forest. Now, on tomorrow's show, we're going to just basically treat that like a Friday show, and we're going to preview the game. We're going to break down Wake Forest. We're going to preview the game. Today is our annual year in review show. So we'll look back over some of the great Bulldog wins and happenings over the course of the last 12 months. And then we'll kind of, we'll share a top 10 list, my top 25 rock songs. No, kidding. Top 10 rock songs from 2025. It's going to be your year in review, and unlike a lot of people out there, I don't have a recency bias when it comes to music. I go back and look and find, because everybody else is, top 10 songs of the year, all like came out in the last 4 months. Not me. No, not me. But happy to be with you, man. It was good to sleep in my own bed last couple of nights, and last night slept like a rock. It kind of helps when you get home at 4 in the morning, you only get a few hours sleep, but nevertheless, it's also the Stranger Things finale tonight. So we'll grab some chicken wings and we'll watch that. Many of you will be watching college football, but the wife and I watch a lot of TV together. I don't watch much TV unless she's here. Like if she's not here, I may put it on to help me go to sleep. But that's kind of like our recreation time. And so this past week, we looked and spent some time with the kids up at, Lake Eagle, Missouri? I can't remember. Whatever. It was a great place. It didn't matter where we stayed. My kids and grandkids were there. So wherever they are is a great place for me to be. And so we watched like the 3 episodes that came out on Christmas Day, like one day apiece. Like I was already an episode behind, so I had to get there and get caught up. And then we watched one episode, and then the final one from the Christmas release together. What's today? Wednesday? I guess we watched that on Monday. So everybody will kind of watch in their own homes this evening, and we look forward to that. I've enjoyed Stranger Things. I have, and I don't know if I've ever told you guys my Winona Ryder story. My kids don't believe this, and I don't care. Because had they not seen Stranger Things, like if I tell this story 10 years ago, they're like, who's Winona Ryder, right? So here's my Winona Ryder story, okay? And the wife has heard this, and she's like, I can't believe you never told me that. I have told her that. I have. It's just I have a lot of stories to tell, and I think sometimes it gets lost. But I was in Atlanta at Hartfield Airport and waiting for a connecting flight to Myrtle Beach. This happened to be the weekend of the House of Blues opening there in Myrtle Beach, and took that flight with Jim Belushi and Rutger Hauer and Edwin Moses and Demi Moore. It was all these people on the plane. It was one of the coolest experiences of my life. However, earlier in the day, as I'm waiting because of weather, because the connecting flight kept getting pushed back and pushed back and pushed back, all of a sudden I saw a young lady walk out of a wall. And what I mean by that is there was a door that was kind of a hidden door, and I didn't understand what that was all about. But basically, in some airports, they have, kind of walkways that aren't accessible to you and I. Well, Winona Ryder walks out, and as she's walking up, I'm saying, man, that looks a lot like Winona Ryder. And this is back in the 90s, really kind of at the tail end of the first segment of her career. Her and Johnny Depp were in the process of breaking up and all that good stuff. And so she starts walking up, and lo and behold, I think it is Winona Ryder. And I said, hey, I hate to bother you, but I just want to tell you, you look more beautiful in person than you do on the silver screen. And she looked at me, and she had been crying. She walked up, she kissed me on the cheek and said, you have no idea how much I needed to hear that today. And then she walked out of my life forever. That's my story when on a rider. I've shared that with other people, and they're like, it was super cool. Well, it was super cool, and I was really just kind of being nice to another human. We didn't have smartphones back then. And at that time, I thought, maybe the Winona Ryder thing was going to be done. And then lo and behold, she comes back in Stranger Things. And so happy for her, right? But that's my brush with her. Obviously I've got other plans for me on the matrimonial side. But it is a true story. And I'm confident I could pass a lie detector test if I was required to take one. But we're all just humans, man. We're just all riding the same rock. And showing a little kindness could be a good thing to other people. And so that's what I did. I was like, yeah, hey, this is a brush with a celebrity. But I just wanted to be kind. And now here we are. And again, so Audrey says, maybe it was a rider from Winona. No, it was not. It was the Winona Ryder. But nevertheless, I know my truth. I know my truth. Let's thank our friends at Bulldog Burger Company, longtime sponsors of this show. Man, I love Bulldog Burger Company. I loved them before they were a subscriber to my website and before they were a sponsor to the show. I have always loved Bulldog Burger Company. And it kind of stands to reason because I've always loved all the Eat With Us group restaurants. I love Harvey's. It's one of my favorite places to eat in the world. I love to grill. You can check it all out, right? They've been there for us so many times at big moments in our lives. And sometimes just making the trip to Bulldog Burger Company makes it a big moment, right? Because you got so many kids, you're like, hey, where do you guys want to eat? Let's go to Bulldog Burger, right? Because it is the restaurant of choice for young hamburger connoisseurs. It's true. You can check the math on that. So Bulldog Burger Company is another one of those great Eat With Us restaurants that just kind of make life a little easier to navigate, right? Because sometimes the biggest crisis that I have in life is what I'm going to have for lunch. And I know when I go to Bulldog Burger Company, I'm going to find something that's going to kind of scratch where I itch and kind of cure what ails me. I know this. And so they take a lot of the guesswork out of the dining experience because they just take care of everything. Put your feet under their table and just let them serve you. They're happy to do it. Great food, great price, great atmosphere, incredible experience going to Bulldog Burger Company. 3 great locations to serve you: University Drive in Stark Vegas, Gloucester Street there in Tupelo, Lake Harbor Drive in the Richmond Flowood area. Have the spring rolls as your appetizer to make you and everybody around you better looking. It's true. It's on the menu now, has been for a while, and I appreciate them quoting me on the menu because I love them, and I think they love me back. Bulldog Burger Company. The place where people go to meet, M-E-A-T. All right, our year in review. We're going to go back here and just kind of highlight some big wins over the years in multiple sports. We're not going to limit it to just quote the big 3. We're going to start way back January 9th. January 9th, as Mississippi State women's basketball team knocked off number 10 Oklahoma 81-77. And I think there were a lot of people on the fence about this team. And it turned out, hey, we kind of hit the wall late. That was a really big early win for us in SEC play. And I think in many respects, Sam Purcell has kind of earned the respect of this fan base. And I think Sam's a guy now with Auburn having made a coaching change and him not being a candidate for that job probably means Sam is here for the foreseeable future. Wins like that help a lot. They do. All right, jumping over to the men's side, January 18th, we did not have a lot of early wins. I didn't have a lot of great SEC wins last year. We were just kind of a fair to middling team. But on January 18th, Bulldogs win 84-81 in overtime over Ole Miss. I was there in attendance. It was a raucous atmosphere. And anytime that we can give a tip of the cap to our student section, we absolutely should. That's the lifeblood of our fan base right there, right? Many of you were students at some point too, and you went up there and stood with those newspapers and showed some utter disdain for our opponents, which we encourage. Just don't do anything stupid. You can hate them all you want, just don't hit them, right? But very, very, very significant win to win that game. And, we'd had some games that had kind of not gone our way, and we needed to close one out. Then we do. All right, February 7th. February 7th. I'm looking at my numbers here. Softball wins 3-1 over Texas Tech. Texas Tech, obviously, very highly regarded program. We beat their ace pitcher. And you kind of go back in hindsight, you begin to look at the pathology of a season, and you could tell pretty early on we had a good squad and really felt like last year that Coach Ricketson really kind of found a second wind. And so that was kind of a big thing early, just to kind of let people know that we were legit. All right, February 13th. It is an 85-77 double overtime win on the road in Nashville in basketball. And what's interesting about that, at that time, we weren't exactly sure what we had. We weren't exactly sure what they had. But we came out of there with a dub, and that's the most important thing, right? No matter who you play, where you play, you got to find a way to get a win, and we were able to do that. That's one of those things you just kind of look back in hindsight that, again, with the Sam Purcell team, you're just kind of figuring some things out. And I think you're, again, kind of building trust within your own roster. That's what happened. And at the time, Vandy was, they were kind of right there with us. They were kind of a contemporary of sorts. And so we needed to find a way to get that win, and we do. Very happy to have it. 85-77, double overtime. That's on February 13th. Yeah, I think I said that correctly. Yeah, February 13th. All right, on the men's side, back to the men's side, we sweep the season series from Ole Miss, 81-71 win on the road at Ole Miss. And you can say whatever you want to about Chris Jans. And that was one of the things about Ben Howland. It's like, well, we always split with him. Chris Jans, in many respects, has kind of dominated Chris Beard. And you look again at the totality of their season, they ended up having a great year. So those two wins are pretty significant. It's not like it was just an exhibition type game. We win both games against Ole Miss. I'm very proud to have those. All right, February the 18th. Probably, at the moment, we needed to do it, right? We ended up rushing the floor. And we beat number 7 Texas A&M 70-54. I thought they were a little bit overrated. I think many of you guys did as well. But we had come so close to having that very significant home court win, and we couldn't get it done. Right? I mean, it's the frustration of the moment. It's like, man, can we finally get over the hump here? Well, we did. And again, maybe A&M didn't prove to be maybe the team many people thought they would be. But they had kind of quietly gone about their business and put together a good season. And then they showed up in Humphrey Coliseum, and it's like we just absolutely whack them. There just absolutely was no chance in that game, it felt like, for them to kind of steal that one. It's like maybe we had learned a little something along the way because we'd had so much trouble closing out games at home. We just needed that very significant home win to feel like we had something to really build upon. Because, we had that big win on the road at Memphis that year. And, we'd won at Vanderbilt. They weren't great. But, we had a chance to beat Kentucky. We ended up losing that game 95-90. Of course, we do get that win over Ole Miss. And, Alabama comes in here. They were number 4 in the country. We thought we had them. We couldn't close. Florida comes in here, number 3. We're in the game for a while. You couldn't close. And so we finally get one. And so it was just kind of like there was this bursting of exuberance, and people wanted to rush the floor. And in many respects, it kind of became a signature win of sorts for us. All right, moving along to March the 5th. And this is baseball, right? So, we had struggled a little bit in non-conference. We were doing great on the weekends, but we were dropping too many midweek games. We lose to Troy, lose down at Southern Miss. Well, we get Southern Miss in our ball yard, and we beat them 18-3. They were ranked 20th at the time. It ends up being a mercy rule affair. And again, people say, well, it's a midweek game. Well, it was a midweek game, and we lost to them, too, and Southern Miss is a quality program. But that was a big moment for us. I think it was like kind of letting some frustration out. And one of those things I think you look back in hindsight, and, you just kind of feel like, hey, that was a big moment where maybe the team offensively kind of took a jump. That's how we felt. Of course, you get into March, the men and the women both make the NCAA tournament. That's always significant. And, one of those things, too, you feel like we've kind of gotten accustomed to it, and we want to get out of that first weekend, and of course we do. But to ignore the fact that we've been to the tournament 3 years in a row on the men's side is pretty rarefied air in the history of our program. I know we'd like to have a greater tradition, but, we can start a new tradition. And I think many people probably surprised Chris Jans is still here because of the job that he's done here at Mississippi State. But I think one of the reasons, too, that maybe he hasn't, commanded maybe one of those, top-tier jobs that he may be willing to listen to is because of the fact that he has begun to make this program his own. And, of course, women do a good job, too. March 9th, softball swept number 18 Auburn. And then they followed that up by taking 2 of 3 on the road at Alabama. So again, softball has that win against Texas Tech against a ranked opponent. They kind of proved it wasn't a fluke. Found some way to make some traction in the SEC. March 22nd, Mississippi State's women's knock off Cal in the NCAA tournament 59-46. And, of course, we lost the second game, the one that would have got us to the round of 16. But not just making the tournament, but winning a game. And, again, I think it shows that Sam Purcell and this staff knows how to coach a little bit. You'd expect us to go win first-round games, but, hey, that's a Power 4 opponent. It's not like that we got paired up, with the Louisiana School of Tortured Sisters or something. We actually went out there and had to beat a Power 4 opponent. We beat them pretty well. And then, of course, we lose to just a buzzsaw with USC. But, so first quarter of the year, pretty good. We get into the month of April. And, of course, basketball is over. Spring practice is getting started. Baseball is kind of getting going. And we stumble out of the gate of non-conference play, as we talked about, in midweeks. But our weekends were strong in baseball. We get into SEC play. What do? We drop the first 3 series. Texas comes in here and sweeps us. We go to Oklahoma. We lose 2 out of 3 up there in a series that we absolutely should have won. And then we get swept at LSU and drop 2 games down there that we absolutely should have won. Kind of the Cajun voodoo got to us a little bit. So we come home, win our first SEC series of the year by taking 2 of 3 against South Carolina. Now Braden Sweeney, that was the closer for South Carolina, he gets us in one of the games, the one game that they do win. I remember sitting outside of Duty Noble Field talking to everybody on my staff the night after the Game 2 thing, and I'm like, you guys, this is, we lose this series, we may be covering a coaching change next week. Well, that didn't prove to be the case. We do get the series against South Carolina, and then we go to Alabama, and we win 2 out of 3. And, of course, the big highlight of that weekend, I think, is the pinch hit home run from Ross Highfield, who is now at Purdue. We wish him the best. But he was a guy that had high expectations, right? And then ultimately Joe Powell proved to be the more consistent guy this year. And then we pinch hit Ross. And I remember when they announced him, I told Jacob, I said, I'm telling you, they're going to be, Ross is over there getting swings in the on-deck circle. The message board is going to ignite when we put Ross in. And what do you know? Ross hits one off the scoreboard that ultimately proves to be the game winner, and State takes the series 2 out of 3. Well, then, of course, things kind of went backwards again, and we go to Auburn and feel like we should have won that series, right? I feel like, we should have pulled Pico earlier. Nothing against Pico. He was just on fumes. We leave him in and ultimately drop a game and ultimately the series, and then Chris Simonis is relieved of duty shortly thereafter. And then we have to kind of figure some things out. Once Lemonis got terminated, there was a lot of people that said, hey, this is a long time coming. There were other people that said, hey, should have given him more time, especially with the month coming up. And I think if you're Zach Selman, if you want to fire him anyway, this is the time to do it. Because the schedule was going to be more favorable in the month of May. If you let him get hot, it makes it more difficult to fire him later. So as much as I like Chris Simonis, the right decision was made. But the month of May proved to be a very good one for Mississippi State, as you guys are well aware. So Super Bulldog Weekend proved to be a great weekend on both diamonds, as softball takes 2 of 3 from Ole Miss, who was ranked number 16 at the time. And then your Bulldogs sweep the weekend series, the Diamond Dogs from Kentucky. And that's when there was a lot of juice about Nick Mingione being a priority candidate, being a guy that we should likely pursue. And you take that series in grand fashion, and then there are people like, you know what, I don't want to go down this route. And maybe that's fair. Come back the next weekend, we take 2 out of 3 from Ole Miss, kind of continuing our dominance. What are they taking, like 1 series from us in a decade over them? In the glory years of baseball at Ole Miss, Mississippi State has still remained their big brother. It's true. It's true. A little bit later in the month, let's see here. We make an NCAA regional with softball. Again, got paired up with Texas Tech. Didn't work out quite the way we wanted, but we went out there and made that thing competitive. We just lost to a better team. But definitely a step in the right direction as it relates to Mississippi State softball. And that's the thing, too. I don't know that maybe we talk about that enough, but when we made the decision to promote from within, when Van Studeman was released and we promoted Samantha Ricketts from within, a lot of people were like, hey, we're just kind of going cheap here. I think when you look back in hindsight, look at what Coach Ricketts and that staff has done, no matter what we paid her, she's done a great job. Done a great job in the most competitive softball league in the country. And you're picking off ranked teams on a more regular basis. There was a time at Mississippi State softball where, we couldn't win anything in SEC play. We just couldn't. And that's not an indictment on those players. They all came in and did the best they could. But I think it's pretty safe to say that we may have the greatest softball coaching staff we've ever had in the history of Mississippi State softball, because we have now kind of become an NCAA tournament regular. And be nice to get back to a super regional. We've done that once. Of course, we hosted here, and we didn't advance. But I think we're on the cusp of kind of getting back to that level. And I think there's a lot of you that have kind of learned to make softball one of your more favorite sports. And then, of course, Mississippi State goes down to Florida State. And I love going down to the ACC schools. There's a couple reasons why. There's a lot of people that talk about how, the SEC is always so overrated in football. So people say that it's not always the case. And like You look at our bowl record this year, it's not great. But you look at the fact that we still have multiple teams playing for a national championship, and we will have representation in that game, barring something totally unforeseen. It's pretty safe to say the SEC, while it may be a little top-heavy at times, is the premier conference in football. But there are a lot of people over the years that kind of prop up these ACC teams in baseball. They're like, oh, well, they're going to challenge for this, and they're going to challenge for that. But the reality of it is you don't have a lot of ACC teams truly competing for things of real significance. Just to kind of frame that up for you, the last ACC team that played for the national championship in Omaha was the 2015 Virginia Cavaliers, coached by your coach, Brian O'Connor. To kind of illustrate that point even more, Coastal Carolina has played for the national championship twice since any ACC team did, right? And so anytime that we get paired up with an ACC team, I know they're going to have a great Friday night starter and they're going to have a couple of arms in the bullpen, but I always feel like we have an opportunity to go out there and advance in a regional. And we didn't. Back-to-back years, we've gone to ACC schools and not come through. We didn't do it at Virginia. We didn't do it at Florida State. And then, shortly after we get back, really before we even get back, we're leaving the stadium, and we get the thumbs up to run the story that Brian O'Connor is going to be your new baseball coach. Probably the most significant sports story of the year, if you're a Mississippi State fan, to go out and get Brian O'Connor, a coach with that incredible resume, to come here, to get a blue blood coach, to come to a blue blood program. You go back and you begin to think about some of the big hires that Scott Woodard made at LSU, and I know that his name has kind of fallen in esteem in the eyes of many. But again, he goes and gets Jay Johnson from Arizona, wins multiple national championships at LSU, goes and gets Kim Mulkey away from Baylor. She wins national championship. So you can kind of, and again, even the Brian Kelly thing didn't work out, but it's a flex, man, to go take Notre Dame's coach. I mean, how many times has that been done in history, at least in the modern era, that somebody would leave Notre Dame for another job? It's crazy to think about, right? Especially in football. But this is kind of what I put that on par with. Like when Nick Saban got hired at LSU out of Michigan State, like Michigan State went like 6-4-1 the year before. I think that's right. I can't remember. But anyway, I know maybe LSU went 6-4-1. Anyway, but Nick Saban wasn't a guy that was held in huge favorites. Like there were nobody was saying, "Hey, go get Nick Saban." Well, they do, and ultimately Nick Saban becomes the greatest football coach in the history of college football. Wins national championships at both LSU and Alabama, and so that didn't make the headlines that this did. And people that follow college baseball understand all of a sudden Brian O'Connor, one of the best baseball coaches in the country, now has the resources that he never really had at Virginia. Now, of course, O'Connor, always the gentleman, will tell you, oh, yeah, we were well funded at Virginia. But you and I both know that that's not necessarily the case. That's Brian being gracious. Because if he had the funding at Virginia that he had here at Mississippi State, good chance he stays at Virginia, right? And, of course, if those of you that followed our coverage of the coaching search understand Virginia was not going to be on par with what Mississippi State was going to do, and really not on par with many of their contemporaries in the ACC. And I do believe in the era of revenue sharing, you're going to see some long-time baseball programs that have had a great deal of success kind of fall by the wayside a little bit. And what I mean by that is they're still going to have the tradition, but if they don't match their contemporaries when it comes to resources, that's going to be an issue. And so there will be some teams, I believe, because of the fact they're not going to be willing to allocate enough of a percentage of revenue sharing to truly compete consistently for Omaha. I think that's the case. And, of course, we go down there and we lose, and then O'Connor is here waiting on us when we get back. So, yeah, very significant. And as you guys are well aware, we're going to be starting baseball here in about 6 weeks. Yeah, it's here, kids. It's here. 6 weeks from now, we'll be getting ready to play the first games of the Brian O'Connor era here at Mississippi State. All right, time for our Close with Blair Player of the Day. It's always an important segment, right? Blair is my friend, your friend, our collective friend in the mortgage industry. Get his 25 years of expertise and know-how working for you to make the dream of homeownership a reality. His phone number, it goes directly to him. Just like you and I, he has a personal phone. This is it. 601-500-2344. 601-500-2344. Now, Blair's not limited to just practicing business in the state of Mississippi. He's licensed to practice in other states. If he can't work with you, he'll let you know. But the reality of it is more Boneyard listeners are becoming homeowners on a more regular basis because they are using Blair Chandler as their mortgage loan originator. Very, very complicated process. Let him simplify it for you. And he's a bulldog through and through. Truly is. Got a season ticket order in for multiple sports, a place here in Starkville. He rides the wave of emotion just like you do, but he doesn't discriminate. You could be a fan of another school and still have Blair be your advocate with underwriting. So whether you're looking for your first home, your next home, or your retirement home, the only name to know is Blair Chandler at closewithblair.com. Okay. Thought long and hard about this today. We're going to go with Cannon Boone as our player of the day. Now, if you've seen that Wake Forest defensive front, they're big, right? I mean, they are certainly Power 4 SEC size. I don't know that they have that same ability on the interior, but they got some guys that can kind of eat up space in the middle and kind of plug some gaps and let their linebackers clean up. And so I think in order for us to win this game, we're going to have great interior protection and push. I think we can make some plays on the outside. Of course, they've got an edge out there that is very, very, very athletic. But I think in order for us to win, we're going to have to find a way to kind of soften the belly a little bit. And I think Cannon Boone's got to be a part of that. Cannon, of course, applying for a medical hardship waiver. We hope that he gets it. The university and the football program needs to know sooner rather than later. But Cannon Boone is a guy that kind of probably the most improved lineman on the team this year. I hate to say the light kind of came on for him, but I think it's one of these guys that figured out, hey, there is a need here at center, and I can go and win that job. And, yeah, he hadn't always been perfect, but he's been really good. And so we're going to need probably his best performance of the year from a personal standpoint and a leadership standpoint. And so we're going to go with Cannon Boone as our player of the day. Appreciate his contributions to Mississippi State, and hopefully he gets another year to come back. And that would fill a hole for you too, but also to the benefit of a year of experience at that position will be very significant for sure. All right, time for today's Top 10 list is always brought to you by CalidoGuitars.com, CALIDO Guitars.com. That's your Mississippi State guitar shop. Now, they specialize in guitars, but they are a stringed instrument operation. So if you're looking for a banjo or a ukulele or anything like that, they can accommodate you with name brand products at a discounted price. Based out of Lake Jackson, Texas, it is a Mississippi State owned and operated guitar shop. They understand what it's like to lose the Egg Bowl, right? They understand it, yeah. And, they're guitar players themselves. And so it's not like you just got some big conglomerate out there that just kind of goes and grabs something off a truck and then slaps a shipping label on it, pushes it out to you. Your guitar is going to come in professionally updated, right? Everything is going to be ready to play. It's not going to be a scenario where you just kind of come in and it takes you forever. It's ready to play right out of the box. Yeah, other than having to pull like the plastic stickers off, which is a lot of fun, that's all you got to do. Yeah. I love my Steve Vai signature guitar. I do. I don't get to play it enough, but I love it. I do. And you need to have some love in your life and maybe some creative pursuits. So maybe you've thought about getting into guitar playing. Maybe you've got a youngster or a neighbor or a friend or somebody like that loves guitar playing. Maybe recommend Calido Guitars to them. You can find beginner guitars, intermediate guitars, and professional grade guitars at CalidoGuitars.com. Now, they're going to give you some incentive to do business with them. And I don't know how you could tell them no, honestly, because they're going to give you the promo code BSR. You know it well. You don't have to go write it down. You know it, BSR. You can use it in person. You can use it over the phone. You can use it online. BSR is going to entitle to you a series of discounts. You get a 10% discount off their already low price. You're going to get no sales tax unless you live in the state of Texas. You're going to get free shipping. In addition to that, they're going to make a 5% donation to the Bulldog Excellence Fund. So it's a win for everybody. You get a great instrument or supplies or accessories or whatever you need for your guitar playing experience at a discount. You're supporting a Mississippi State small business. And in turn, you're supporting Mississippi State directly because of the donation to the Excellence Fund. Be sure and check them out today, KalitoGuitars.com. Okay, here are my top 10 rock songs from 2025. Now, we did a list yesterday, kind of like some old bands with new songs. These are new bands. And maybe not quite so new, but they're modern rock bands. A lot of people think, Steve, you're still stuck in the 80s. You're wrong about that. You're wrong about that. I've seen most of the bands that we're about to talk about in person within recent years. So we're going to start with number 10. I got a friend that's closely affiliated with them. I haven't met them. I haven't seen them in person, but I love them. It's From Ashes to New. A great track called New Disease out this year. That's your number 10 song, New Disease. From Ashes to New. And it's really kind of a song about, there are a lot of people out there that like to be sick, right? And you see it, we've talked about on the show before. There are a lot of people that volunteer to be victims. So anything that comes along, some new affliction, they think that's them. There is some attention seeking that kind of goes along with that. Number 9, a band that we absolutely loved with their debut album. It's Architects. And if you like the modern processed sound, Architects may be the band for you. Great track from them called Everything Ends. That's your number 9 track. Everything ends, and it's true. Good, bad, or indifferent, at some point, everything ends. That's why it's so incredibly important to appreciate what you have today. Everything at some point is going to end. Whether that's a job, relationship, a life, at some point, all things fall away. That's why it's so important to live in today and be grateful for who and what you have. Because there will come a time when you will lose and you'll look back and say, I wish I would have valued that more. I wish I would have spent more time doing this. I wish I would have worked a little harder, played a little harder, and maybe loved a little harder. So, an important reminder. Number 8, a band that just won't go away, man. And when you have talent, that happens. Many of you became fans of this band because of this show, which makes me incredibly proud. I remember the very first time we did a top 10 list that featured Hellstorm, the inbox lit up. People were like, well, where in the world have I been? I didn't know this incredible band with Lizzie Hale fronting the band Hellstorm. Really kind of a ballady type, eerie, dark quality track from them called Darkness Always Wins. It's not necessarily the case, but I think you'll enjoy the song. The vocal stylings of Lizzie Hale are unparalleled when it comes to female singers in rock music these days. And I think that you'll have some fun with that one. All right, number 7, a band that we've had on the list a couple times before. They teamed up with Ivan Moody, a 5-Finger Death Punch. We're talking about The Funeral Portrait. The track is Holy Water. Number 7, Holy Water from The Funeral Portrait. Again, that's a band, too, that is kind of evolving a little bit, and they're kind of beginning to gain a little traction in the modern rock world, and maybe you're not quite as familiar with them, but you probably should be. Just a kind of a band to watch. All right, number 6, I don't know that anybody has had a better last couple of years than Ronnie Radke. Even though he is a very controversial figure on social media, he speaks his mind, and he gets his Instagram account banned all the time, and he gets it back, and he comes back. It's just nuts. But and he roasts people on social media. And some of you may find that offensive, but some of it is very funny. But sometimes he does hit below the belt. Well, Following Reverse is fronted by Ronnie Radke, and I have a Ronnie Radke tattoo. They teamed up with Marilyn Manson and released a track called God is a Weapon, and then went on tour to sell out arenas all over the country. Pretty incredible live show as well. But the song itself, in many respects, it's kind of in many ways kind of a commentary on modern religion. And it's kind of thought-provoking. And you say, well, Steve, Marilyn Manson? Yeah, I get it. My point being is that if you look at the lyrical content on this, I think you'll see at times some of it applies. It may not apply to you, but it probably applies to somebody you know. All right, number 5, way back in January of 2025. And it was the perfect time to release this song. And I remember seeing it on Reels, and I couldn't wait to get my hands on the full thing. It's Shinedown's 365. You know, a lot could happen in a year. And Brent Smith's one of those people that writes lyrics that kind of elicits emotion from me. And that's one of the things I've always loved about him. Some of my favorite songs for the last 20 years have been Shinedown songs. And as they've begun to heal at times, they've kind of softened the sound a little bit. A lot of people don't like that. I remember when those guys rocked. Well, they still do, but it's kind of in a different way. But they are a lot more radio friendly these days. But 365 is a song that, I can listen to it in just the right moment. Man, I just feel like a tear hit, in my eye. Because a lot can happen in a year. And I think it's important maybe for us to revisit that song now almost a year later. And you look back and it's like, I had a friend of mine said this years ago. He goes, man, it's like every day, it's kind of the same. And you look back at the end of the year, everything's different. Everything changes. The only constant in life is change. But it's one of those things too. I think when you listen to this song, if you're unfamiliar with it, I think it'll strike a chord in you. All right, number 4. A band that we have been advocating for before they were even signed. We got some Bulldogs that are close to these guys too, based out of Memphis, Tennessee. It's Sleep Theory. And for those of you that know the book When the Bottom Falls, the title of that book was inspired by the first full single from this band called Another Way. And that's in the chorus, When the Bottom Falls. And the song just, Danny was out in New Mexico, and I was an emotional wreck. And that song kind of ministered to me. And I was on the way home. I left her out there, another trip. And I think I cried the whole way to the state line. And I called her and said, I'm going to write the recovery book, and I'm going to call it When the Bottom Falls. Because of the fact there is no true bottom in addiction. That's what there's just these misnomers and truisms in recovery jargon that just are simply not true. Well, he hit rock bottom. Now, there's always more. There's always a bigger price to pay. There's always a depth you haven't reached yet, right? That's important to understand. When the bottom falls, people say, well, they hit bottom. Well, it can keep going. And if you've read my book, When the Bottom Falls, you kind of understand my own personal struggles with that. And there was one point I wrote, it was like a really, really, really dark point in my life. And I guess you as my valued reader, you're going to read this and think, okay, this is when he makes the turnaround. And you're wrong. Because I kept digging. I hit the bottom and I kept digging. But thankfully, God saved me, and I was thank God for good health insurance and having the opportunity to save my life. All right, number 3. We talk about songs that speak to us. This song speaks to me in a way that I don't know a song has in a long time. It takes me to a place that is very familiar. And maybe it's not a special place for me, but it's a place that I know well. And we're talking about Bad Omen's song, Spectre. I think the song is absolutely magnificent. And the chorus goes, do you feel love? I know I don't. I have been in those places, and maybe that's where you are today. And listening to this song really gives me an appreciation of how far I've come. And it also makes me sad to know that there are other people out there that are experiencing that same quality of life, where they feel devoid of love and estranged from every part of it. And there are times this song will make me somewhat emotional. And I want to share it with you just because of the fact, even if you don't like modern rock, I think this is a song that's worthy of your attention. It's Bad Omen's Spectre. Number 2, and I remember driving to Columbia, Missouri, and I listened to the Sleep Token album the entire way up there, the entire time I was there, and the entire way back. This album is incredible. Absolutely incredible. The lead single is maybe not my favorite song on the album, but it's in the top 3. But we're going to go with Caramel from Sleep Token. So, Stick to Me Like Caramel. Yeah. There's just a lot of things that happen in life, and sometimes you need to kind of stick with the winners, right? There's just so many things that happen. And we deal with that a lot of times in recovery. There are a lot of people that are in the recovery rooms that are not really recovered. And there are some people, too, that are there because of court mandates. And there are people there that are just trying to pick up chicks. I'm just going to kind of tell you how it is. And you have these people that come in, they're so vulnerable, looking for anything they can, just a life raft to lynch onto, just because of the fact they feel like they're drowning. And not everybody has the best of intentions. So stick with the winners. And it's not just in recovery, but in life. And there are a lot of people out there that are not winning. They'll tell you they're winning, but they're not winning. There's no fruit of victory. Really all they have is the collective opinion of other people in an echo chamber to tell them how great they are. You got to really win. But number one, and I said this probably on the show the weekend or the week after this song was debuted. I said, you know what? This may end up being the song of the year. And it should have been. It should have been. And I think because of the fact that it came a little bit later in the year, some people were like, well, do we really want Bad Omens on here twice? Well, my rule of thumb traditionally is you get one band, you get one song, you get one spot on our list. But because this was so great, I elected to put 2 Bad Omen songs on here because I think to not do so would be unfair to them and unfair to you. These are my 10 favorite songs from the last year. And my favorite song is Bad Omens, Left for Good. And a lot of this, in many respects, takes me back and gives me a sense of pride, right? When I go back and think about, 34 years ago, this is where I was. And I didn't have any dreams. I didn't have any prospects of a brighter future. And it wasn't just because of drugs and narcotics and, alcohol. It wasn't just because of that. That was all a symptom of a bigger problem. And that's one of the things about recovery that I think people don't know. I get those messages all the time. Steve, if we could just stop him from drinking. Steve, if we could just get her off the drugs. Well, then you're just going to have a very wounded person that doesn't have their medicine. Right? And eventually, your remedy becomes your poison. Because everything is effective negatively for a person in addiction. There are some people out there that can have a couple drinks and go home and have a nice time. That's not me. That's not me. It never has been. And there are some people out there that can dabble in narcotics and they can handle it. Well, that's not me. Because of the fact I had so many character defects and I had some things within my life about how I saw myself that needed some immediate repair. There was going to be no hope of recovery without that. Because if all you do is stop drinking, you're never truly recovered. You're just dry. You have the same issues. And it's not the drugs and alcohol that give us the issues. Now, they create more, but we already had the issue. And yeah, I do think there is a genetic predisposition to a lot of this stuff. Now, it's just like there's some people out there that could go out there and eat chocolate cake every day and never develop diabetes, and other people that watch their diet every day have to be on medication. We're all wired a little bit differently. But I was a mess long before I became a drug addict. And I have so many people, like when I go give my story, they say, I always wonder, how did this person become a drug addict? And they said, when I hear your story, I think, no wonder. Yeah, no wonder. Because what happens is so many negative things happen in life, and I just did not have the ability to cope with a lot of that stuff. And so when I got clean and sober, and I began to listen to people, truly listen to people, my life began to change. And I stayed sober the first 2 years despite everybody, because I didn't think I could make it. Right? And I remember telling Robert P., I said, man, I'm going to do everything you tell me to do to prove to you this doesn't work. And you know what? It did. Here I am 34 years later, still trying to prove him wrong. And I can tell you this too, even if you're not somebody that deals with addiction, and sometimes people are hesitant to even say the word addiction because there's these negative stereotypes and stigma that go along with that. Well, I'm an addict. I am an addict. And I am very open and transparent about that. Guys, and I'll be honest with you, when I get really busy, I can eat the same thing for lunch every day. Every day. And not even think twice about it. Because that's kind of how I'm wired. Well, this kind of fits the bill, I enjoy this enough. I'll just eat this again today. There are times that I'll find a song that just kind of rubs me the right way, and I'll just listen to it on repeat for 100 miles. There are just things about me that are different. It doesn't make me lesser than. It just makes me a person that's got difficult things to navigate through. And all of us have our own cross to bear. But this song, Left for Good, really makes me think about that aspect of it. Because there are times I get caught up in old behaviors where I start thinking, this little vicarious pleasure here might make me feel better, right? And that's kind of what the song talks about. Is why do I reach for all the things that I left for good? And of course, there's a little double entendre in there too. There are things that I left for the betterment of myself and my soul and my life and the people that love me. And there are things that I left for good, as in finality. And those kind of things work together. And so I share that with you just because of the fact I hope in many respects that maybe I have given you over the years a new understanding of what addiction truly is. A lot of people see this as a morality issue. They think, they just want to go have some extra fun. Well, that may be how it starts. Maybe. But I know some very well-raised people that have dealt with some very real-life trauma, and they turn to drugs and alcohol to cope with that trauma, and many times because they were scared to go to that well-raised family and say, I am having trouble. And it's one of those things, too, that I had a discussion with somebody a while back, and it was a very heated discussion, and it was a discussion that needed to be had to kind of clear the air. And I just basically asked this person, what is it about me you find so offensive? And they brought up some things that were never even on my radar, right? It was clearly a misunderstanding, right? But we don't get to a point of reconciliation if we're not willing to have the awkward conversation. And you're like, hey, well, you did this and you said that. Then I was like, that wasn't even about you. Maybe I'm wrong for being cryptic in my wording and phrasing sometimes. That wasn't even about you. And I'm sorry that you felt that way because maybe I didn't communicate myself as clearly as I should have. It had nothing to do with you. And you could just kind of see the light in their face. And then I explained, I said, hey, here is why I did this, why I said this, and here is who created that moment for me, and you were not even involved in that. And you could just see in their face, it's like, you mean we have wasted all this time and effort avoiding each other? Oh, yeah, it's true. And we're both at fault. Yeah, we're both at fault. It's not just you misunderstanding me, it's me not communicating myself properly. And I left some room for ambiguity, and as a result, you kind of inferred some things that were not truly implied. And so we have both wasted a lot of time where we could have been much better relationship-wise. And so that's an important aspect. And I remember sharing the story with you guys too about Dana and the laundry basket and the light in the laundry room in Baton Rouge. I shared that on the show, and I bet I had 10 guys message me and say, dude, you're exactly right. I'll give you the cliff notes and we'll move on. But my office used to be off the kitchen, and at the other end of the kitchen was the laundry room. And sometimes Dana would just leave the light on in the laundry room. And so I'm sitting there trying to work, and the longer that I worked, the more irritating that it got. Not to mention, too, we had 4 kids at home, so we needed to keep the light bill as low as we could. And eventually it became a resentment. In the beginning it was an annoyance, and eventually it became a resentment. And finally I get to the point, and I said, babe, why do you consistently leave that laundry room light on? I have to get up and go turn it off. Why do you do that? And she said, babe, I'm sorry. I just don't think about it because when I'm walking out of the laundry room, I typically have a basket full of clothes. And all of a sudden, I was like, you know what? It's easier for me to just be the good husband and go turn the light out than to sit there and seethe in resentment, right? Because the reasoning behind her actions wasn't anything passive-aggressive. It was more needful, right? But that happens in life. We start rubbing each other the wrong way more times than not because we're just not willing to have the awkward conversation. So I encourage you in a very loving and respectful way, if you've got something that's kind of eating your lunch, talk about it. Don't just sit there in silence, because if you had the ability to reconcile this within your own mind, you already would have done it. You got to open your mouth to have the conversation. If you have ideas for the top 10 list, reach out, let us know. Best way to do that is to hit up Roy Samanti on X at Dogmatic67. That's DAWGMATIC 67. And you can find our great list on Spotify on that same handle. Again, Dogmatic67. You can find me on all forms of social media at Scout Steve R. All right, next segment of the show brought to you by Campus Book Mart, a Starkvillian institution. That was a great time to shop at Campus Book Mart. You know, it's time for the end of the year, pre-inventory clearance, things like that. You can find some great items when you come to town and stop by and see their smiling faces. And chances are there was something on your Christmas list you didn't get. You wanted to kind of wait it out. And maybe there's a needful thing you need. It's got a Mississippi State logo on it. Well, you can find it at Campus Book Mart. Now, if you can't make it to town, or perhaps game day is a difficult shopping day for you, well, we can help. Visit campusbookmart.net, and by being a loyal Boneyard listener, we'll give you a phrase that pays, and that is BSR, Beautiful Steve Robertson. That gets you free shipping on all orders over $75. Any order less than $75, absolutely incomplete. Campus Book Mart, your home for the greatest Mississippi State merchandise available in the known universe. Be sure and check them out today. All right, kind of getting back to our year in review. Not much happens in July. You know, we get some recruiting stuff every now and again. But the reality of it is, not a lot happens in July. It's the one time of year that we can kind of, those of us in the industry, can kind of take a little bit of a deep breath and kind of maybe get some downtime with the family. You know, you got to work a little bit harder to produce content, but that's what we do, you know. It's kind of a year-round job these days, but during the month of July, we're kind of humping and grinding a little bit to kind of get you guys ready for the beginning of fall camp. But there were some cool things that happened in August. I don't know if you guys recall this, but back on August 24th, the Mississippi State soccer team, defending their SEC title, had a big win. They knocked off Wake Forest, who was number 8 in the country, by the score of 2-1. I was there that night to cover the game. It was great. Ellie Perry, of course, the hero again. And, man, what are we going to be without Ellie Perry? New leadership now within the program. And so, you know, we wish our former Bulldogs the best. I don't really like the term former Bulldog, but in the day of the transfer portal, you almost have to consider some of that. Right, I love the fact that, you know, people came and spent 4 to 5 years with us and were part of our family for an extended period of time. But that's not exactly what happens these days. Matter of fact, I took a break after the top 10 list to go grab a drink, and was looking on Twitter, and there was a kid that says, "I'm entering the portal. Now it's time for me to get what I deserve." Where does this sense of self-entitlement come from? Right? And the fact that you're getting your education paid for, and you're getting a stipend, and you're making a little rev share and NIL money, and many times before you make a real solid contribution, and it's about what you deserve. Yeah, some people have some important lessons to learn about life. But yeah, Ellie Perry, a Bulldog hero, and I think you could certainly make the case the greatest Mississippi State soccer player of all time. I think that's fair to say. All right, we get into football season on August 30th. Much to the dismay of many, which is weird to me, we beat Southern Miss 34-17. And I remember there were a lot of these ghosts. People are all worried. You know, Charles Huff was the big bad wolf, and he brought the whole Marshall team down there. And I'm going to be honest with you, we could have beat them anyway. Even if they had brought the whole Marshall team intact, we would have beaten them, because from a talent differential standpoint, we are far beyond what they are and were. It's all hypothetical anyway. But, yeah, we took care of Southern Miss. It was a bit of a game there for a half, but then that third quarter, Bulldogs played about as well as they can play. Put the game away. Came back the next week number 2, and we beat Arizona State. It was a big moment. Everybody rushed the field. We paid a big fine. And it felt like, hey, the dark cloud is being lifted. right? We may not be all the way there, but we've taken some strides. We should have won that game. But again, what happened in that final minute just doesn't happen to us very often. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I'm not being self-loathing, but that's the reality. How many times do we have to make that game-winning drive in the final minute and come up short? Well, this time we didn't. Blake Shapen found Brennan Thompson, who ran away, and then, of course, some people are like, well, they had a bust in coverage. You know what? That happens in sports. And sometimes you create a bust because of what you do schematically. You put the safety in conflict and get your best wide receiver paired up one-on-one, and you make a pass and you win a game. Doesn't happen enough, but it happened here. Kind of jumping back to soccer for a minute here. On September 12th, Mississippi State defeated number 1 Tennessee by the score of 3-2. 3-2. I'm laughing because the bride just answered in the family chat. I saw a meme, and it's a couple tickets from Ticketmaster. And it says, stay home and do nothing, go to bed early. And so I said, hey, I got our New Year's Eve tickets. I can't wait. She responds, perfect. Yeah, absolutely perfect. But anyway, yeah, so big win. We knock off number 1 again. We knocked off number 1 last year, Arkansas. And we get Tennessee this year. And again, Mississippi State soccer is going to have a little bit of a rebuild this coming year. But it was a really good year. It wasn't a great year, but a really good year this past year. All right, September the 20th, Mississippi State beats Northern Illinois well and wraps up the non-conference portion of our schedule with a 4-0 record. And at that point, everybody thought, okay, now it's time for us to kind of pour some belief in this team. Okay, we go down and beat Southern Miss, even though our fans had created all of this acrimony and angst about the possibility of us losing that game. It's still ridiculous. You get a top 10 win, you beat Alcorn State as expected, and you hammer Northern Illinois. So now all of a sudden you're 4-0. And you think, you know what, hey, in order for us to make a bowl game, we were going to have to go undefeated in non-conference play. Well, we had. And so at that point, there was a lot of exuberance as we got ready to get into SEC play. And we were playing better. Obviously, there were some things we could have improved upon. But 4-0 is 4-0, and I think for the first time in a long time, we began to have some confidence in our football program. All right, we get in October, and it's one of those things too you kind of look at and begin to think about, kind of what's next. Well, your women's soccer team beats Ole Miss again to claim the Magnolia Cup for the 6th consecutive year. There was a time we got dominated in the sport by our in-state rival, and that's the situation now where things are different. Things are different. The shoe's on the other foot. Now, next year may prove to be different. But as the young ladies call the trophy Magnolia Trophy has got a lot of Mississippi State fingerprints on it here in the last 6 years. And you begin to think about our Bulldog seniors who graduated having never lost to Ole Miss. That's very significant. And it's always worthy of discussion on this show and many others. All right, November the 1st, Mississippi State goes to Fayetteville, Arkansas, and we beat Bobby Petrino and the Razorbacks, who were not good this year. It was a crazy game, and it's not that Arkansas was devoid of talent. They just didn't have much on the defensive side, and that mattered in the end, and it was so much topsy-turvy stuff that happened in that fourth quarter. You could see why both teams had struggled to close out games, and a lot of it's because you just didn't have a lot of appreciable depth on defense. But State makes the big play late on fourth down. We get it out to Anthony Evans, who breaks a tackle with the sticks and empowers through 2 more. One of the better runs after catches in recent memory by a Bulldog wide receiver. And we win. And now all of a sudden people are like, okay, we've got 5. Surely we'll get another one. And we snap an SEC streak that dated back to 2023, a winless streak within the league. And we hadn't won an SEC home game since then, but we finally snapped that streak. On November the 2nd, Mississippi State soccer in the SEC tournament beats number 4 Arkansas. We lost the regular season matchup to them, and then ultimately we win this. We get to the NCAA tournament again, and we get upset by Lipscomb. Well, what do? Nick Zimmerman leaves. We go hire the all-time winningest coach, Coach O'Brien from Lipscomb, to kind of champion our program as we move forward. Now, he's going to have some resources here he hadn't had before, going to have some facilities he hadn't had before, but he's going to have some recruiting relationships that he brings with him. And so that's an important hire for those of you that have become fans of the sport in recent years because you cheer for the logo. That's kind of where you are. And so now we get into the month of December. Not a whole lot going on in December, non-conference basketball, things of that nature. But the most important thing right now is Friday's Duke's Mayo Bowl. And you recall what a fun day that was when they began to announce the bowl announcements. And we began to kind of hear some rustling out there. And went on a message board and said, you know what, it's not done yet, but this may happen. And then ultimately it did. And State makes a Duke's Mayo Bowl because of some opt-outs. Regardless of how we got there, we got there. Now, I'm not going to sit here and defend a 5-7 season. I'm not going to do it. Not my role in this process, and it's not how I feel. I'm never going to be happy with 5-7. I am happy with the amount of progress that we've made, and I think actually we probably made more progress than people anticipated, which is why 5-7 sits so stiff in the crawl right now. Because beginning of the year, we all thought maybe 5-7, at best 6-6. And then you go back and you look at how we lost to Florida, a game that we should have won. How we lost to Tennessee, a game that we led and lost in overtime. And a game that we lost to Texas. They were up 17 with 12 minutes to play and somehow can't close the game out. If we get blown out in those games, it might even be easier to deal with being 5-7. But the fact that we were on the cusp of potentially being 6-6, 7-5, I don't think you get all three of them. But the games were there to win. And the fact that we were so competitive in those games, I think adds to some frustration for the season. But I don't think in any way it wipes away the progress that we've made. And so now we believe we have a generational quarterback in Camario Taylor who is now leading this program into a new era. Now, when you begin to think about what a freak he is, not just physically, but spiritually, emotionally, and mentally, and how everybody kind of gravitates to him, there are some guys that bring out the best in other players. And I believe that's the case for Camario Taylor. And so now we have an opportunity to showcase his skill and also to end this year on a winning note and give us some real juice heading into portal season. And that's one of the things that's so incredibly important now is Camario is already a made guy, right? People know his name around college football. And there's some people out there that Camario met at the Elite 11. There's some people that Camario has played with and against in the high school ranks. But also, too, in this 1 year of college, there's some people that have said, hey, that kid's going somewhere. And so Camario, I think, is going to be a big part of our portal recruiting, especially on the offensive side, especially wide receiver. Not that Camario is going to be limited to the offensive recruiting conversations. He is the leader of this team and the face of the franchise kind of moving forward. And so we need him to play well, to win the game, to paint himself and the future of this program in the best light possible. And so that's been a consistent talking point on this show and on the message boards about how significant this game could be, not just for this year and not just for our seniors, but to really give you some juice going into the offseason. And now, of course, with the portal opening Friday morning, there's going to be a lot of traffic. There's going to be a lot of things that happen. Like when Jeff Lebby has said when he gets back from Charlotte, he expects visitors to already be here. Everybody's got an agent. Everybody reaches out. So there's already some pre-portaling stuff that goes on all around the country. And so you're going to have guys here, and you guys know on the football side, it's a little different than baseball, right? Baseball, a lot of those guys take multiple visits before they make a decision. In football, if you don't get them at the end of the visit or shortly thereafter, you typically don't get them. Jacoby Jackson's kind of an exception to that rule. Will Whitson, an exception to that rule. But by and large, if you don't get them to commit during the visit, they're probably going elsewhere. And so it'll be interesting to see how quickly we pick up some commitments in the portal One of the things I think is so important to understand too is, the enrollment dates always have a little wiggle room, right? That's kind of how things go, right? You got a registrar that sometimes can kind of work with you, but when you begin to look at like what's ahead for Mississippi State 2026, so we have new freshman and transfer student orientation on January the 12th. Classes begin on the 14th. So you'd like to have everybody in by the 14th, but that's not realistic. You're going to have some stragglers. You're going to have some guys that see things a little bit differently. But the last day to drop a course is January 21st. Last day to add is January 22nd. So basically these first 3 weeks in January are going to be huge for Mississippi State because the construction of your football team largely takes place now. You're not going to have many freshmen that contribute next year. You may have some, but not many. So the next 3 weeks is probably something you need to pay attention to. And people are like, Steve, I just want to know if we're going to get them and if they're any good. We're going to do our best to keep you apprised of that too. But now is a great time to subscribe at genespage.com because as we get information from our array of sources, we share that over there before the moment. So there'll be times that you may have an idea, a kid visited, well, what did he say? Where do we stand? You get that information there before it's kind of made public on the free web. And so you can be prepared to be really the most educated person within your circle of friends of Mississippi State fandom. So come join us. Time is running out, 50% off the annual subscription price. Again, a great time to jump aboard. But we're going to be nose to the grindstone, all portal. For the most part, everybody involved with kind of the football recruiting aspect of our coverage, that's just all we're going to be working on. We're not going to be talking about this guy's going to this junior day or whatever. We're going to be locked in because our staff is locked in. You guys are locked in because you want to win. You want to know what's coming, who we should be excited about. It was around this time last year. We kind of got to know who Will Whitson was. And granted, we only had him for a couple of games this year, and he is going to be back. But the reality of it is we knew long before he went public that he was going to be a Bulldog. And that's one of the most important things, too, that we kind of pride ourselves on is letting you know the news before the news breaks. But you go back and look in hindsight, we had the benefit of the spring portal last year. We're not going to have it this year. And so it's going to be something we've never seen when it comes to portal recruiting. And everybody is under kind of a similar time frame. Those that are on the quarter system may be a little bit different. Some people have later class starts. And so that's why it's important to have a good relationship with the registrar's office because they can work with you a little bit. And listen, we really haven't had an issue with that. We haven't had a guy that's wanted to come and all of a sudden, John Dickerson's office is like, oh, no, he can't come. They find a way to make it work. But everybody out there is going to need to move and to secure housing, and there's going to be a lot of things that have to happen. And so a lot of these guys are going to make decisions within the first couple of weeks. That's going to be the big part of their process is they take their visits, and then all of a sudden, hey, I got to get all my stuff from Texas to Starkville, Mississippi. Where are we going to live? What kind of things are going to happen here? And so that's an aspect of all of this. And many people wonder, hey, what about the waivers and things like that? We expect to have some news on a couple guys in the next week, but some of these guys are going to have to go through the court system to try to get a TRO or probably get another year awarded, and there's no telling when that's going to break loose. So kind of understand that kind of moving forward. There are a lot of pieces to this thing, and we do our best to kind of put them in place for you. All right, final segment of the show brought to you by the Stark Vegas Clubhouse, the best place to stay in the Golden Triangle, bar none, if you're bringing a large group to town, and you should. Yeah, you should. You've seen it, you've thought about it, man, wouldn't it be great? Well, you know what, make it great. Okay, go ahead and make your plans today. Google the Stark Vegas Clubhouse. When you do, their Facebook page auto-populates, right? You can peruse all the pictures of all the amenities available to you and your guest. Let's go ahead and run them down for you. Full service kitchen, wet bar, back porch area, fire pit area, plenty of parking, 6 bedrooms, 2 soon to be 3 baths. be sure and check it out. You'll be glad you did. We've stayed there. I'm speaking from personal experience. Really didn't want to leave, to be honest with you. It was just so nice to have everybody together. If you've had that experience, you know exactly what I mean. It's so hard to say goodbye to the people you love when you spend a couple of quality days together. Well, you know, you owe it to yourself to make those plans. Now, when you Google the Stark Vegas Clubhouse, there are going to be some booking options that pop up too. You can go the Airbnb or VRBO route, completely up to you. Completely up to you. But if you want to save some money, and I suspect you do, book through the Evolve website. Promo code BSR10. That's Beautiful Steve Robertson 10. Gets you 10% off your stay. So just by listening to this show, you're saving some money at the premier place to stay in the Golden Triangle. Whether it's a ball game weekend or maybe a midweek trip up to check out some basketball or just some time away, right? They can accommodate you. Be sure and check them out today. The Stark Vegas Clubhouse. Okay, so looking back, we had a good year. We didn't have a great year. We had a good year. And I would venture to say I could even make the case that we had an above average year. I don't even know that I would even say good in some respects, because you go back and look in hindsight. Okay, fired our baseball coach. We didn't win a regional. Okay, now no matter how you feel about baseball, we should always be a team. Like a road regional win should be like the bottom for us. Back-to-back road regional losses. So we made a coaching change. Now that proved to be for the betterment of the program. At least we believe so, right? We appreciate Chris Simonis and his contributions to our program. He'll always be the first guy that won an AFL championship here, but I suspect he won't be the last. Softball. We didn't win a regional. Made a regional, got a tough draw, but we didn't win it. Now, our expectations in softball, a little bit less than they are in baseball. But maybe it's time to elevate the expectations a little bit. Again, we're not just fielding a team to field a team. And I can tell you, Coach Ricketts is extremely competitive. T-Brat, the whole crew, man. They want to win. They want to win big. We made the NCAA tournament on the men's side. We didn't win a game. Again. It's crazy to think about that aspect of it. Now, granted, what we have to do is stop getting on the 8-9 line game, right? We have to quit getting that. That's one of those things that has kind of been a burr in the saddle, shall we say. And that's our own fault, right? It's not that we get screwed with pairings. We didn't close out the season the way we should have. And as a result, we've had to play difficult first-round matchups. And you go back and you begin to kind of think about, and this, sometimes the numbers are offensive to some people. Sometimes. But what's interesting when you kind of go back and look at, the men's basketball tournament history, there was a time we weren't allowed to go. And then we went. Took us a little while to kind of get back, but obviously that 96 team still kind of stands out. Obviously, it's the greatest team in school history. But we have not won an NCAA tournament game since 2008. We beat Oregon, again in an 8-9 game. And that's just kind of how it played out. And we lost, Memphis. We still feel like we should have won that game. We lose by 3. But we have been to the tournament 5 times since then and not won a game. So that's got to change. So in order for us to take the next step, and again, hey, the fact that we've made the tournament 3 years in a row, it's only happened one other time in school history when we were allowed to go. That's a great accomplishment. But it's time for us to expect a little bit more. On the women's side of things, we had some great run with Vic Schaefer. And many of us thought, hey, we'll never get back to that level. And you know what? Maybe we won't. Maybe we don't do that. But it's pretty clear that we do have a program that we can be proud of. And that's one of the things that I think many people for a couple of years there just kind of felt like, this thing is just kind of falling apart on us. We got invested in this, and now we're not getting the return on this. And again, you live through the glory days of women's basketball, right? I mean, you can't expect to stay there forever. But when you begin to think about what Sam Purcell has done in recent years, compared to what we have done historically, I think you got to be pleased with kind of where we are. And again, you go back and look at this, hey, we go in 2023, we don't make it in 24. We still made the postseason, but we don't really count those. We're in the WBIT tournament, won a couple of games, but many of you even forgot that we went. But we're back in there last year. But the one thing that I can say about Sam Purcell, they've made a habit of winning games in the postseason. Once they get to the postseason, you go back 2023, we were the first four, we win. We upset number 6 Creighton, and we gave Notre Dame all they wanted and then some. Had the lead late, ended up losing by 5. And then last year we get in, we take care of Cal, and we lose to USC. But even in WBIT, we won a couple games. And so I think you feel like, hey, maybe this thing's heading in the right direction. Then you begin to think about soccer, obviously. You win the SEC title 2 years ago, or a year ago, and then this year you had a good year, not a great year, and you get beat in the NCAA tournament. But, we've become an NCAA tournament regular. And again, I don't want to put too many expectations on a new staff this year. But you guys have grown accustomed to winning. It's nice to be able to go out there and sit in a nice, cool evening and watch the maroon and white go win games and play for things of significance. And so we'll see what happens as we move forward. But I think you're a fan base now that expects more than for us just to go fill the team out there. And then, of course, there's football. And so people say, Steve, the schedule's brutal again. Hey, newsflash, in the neighborhood in which we live, that's pretty much always going to be the case. We're not going to get lucky enough every now and again to consistently have bottom feeder teams in the conference appear on our schedule. Just not how things are going to work out. Sometimes you get lucky, you get some people when they're down, but rather than lower the hurdles, I think it's time for us to start, expecting Mississippi State to rise to the foundational standard. We did for a long time. We could do it again. You see, but Steve, it's a new era. Well, you're just trying to find a way. You're trying to find a way to be right. I just want to win. I don't care who's right or wrong. I just want to win football games. But you start looking at the schedule for next year. We open up Louisiana Monroe. Should be a win. Got to go to Minnesota. Probably a toss-up. We don't know what they're going to look like or what we're going to look like by the time we get there. I don't think they're going to be on the par with Arizona State. I don't think. But we got to go on the road to Minneapolis. Then you open going to South Carolina. Shane Beamer going to be coaching for his job next year. Who knows what that team looks like after the portal. Missouri comes here. Going to be a different look team in many respects, but they're going to have Ahmad Hardy coming back. Or so we expect. He signed a 2-year deal, so we'll see how things progress. But, that's Missouri's Missouri. We didn't play well at all up there. And I think if there's ever a team that showed our deficiencies on defense this year, it was Missouri. And I think that changes the way you look at the portal. You got Alabama. Guys, wouldn't you have loved to have played Alabama this year? Right? They don't seem like the big bad wolf. We expected them to take a step back. And as we say that, they're in the playoffs. They're still competing for a national championship. But I just think with the transfer portal that Alabama's not going to be the big bad wolf they once were, because I don't think you're going to be able to stockpile talent the way they always did. We got to go to LSU. First year with a new staff down there. I'm kind of glad we get them, I guess, relatively early. It's middle of October. But we'll have an idea of what they can do and what they're about when we get ready to go down there. So, again, another team that's got a first-year head coach. Oklahoma comes here. That'll be fun. What are they going to look like next year? Obviously, they were a team that made the playoff and then didn't advance. But, what will they return? We'll find out. We got to go to Texas. We'll take on Arch Manning again. So, obviously, our defensive depth is going to be tested there. And then we get Vanderbilt without Diego Pavia, or so we expect. Who knows? He may play forever. And then Auburn comes in. Wouldn't you have wanted to play Auburn this year? I suspect you would. Tennessee Tech comes in. That's your FCS opponent. And as we said, and again, so many people wanted to argue. So many people in error, but never in doubt. They said, hey, we need to go to the non-SEC game schedule because I get tired of seeing State play, these FCS schools. It's not the FCS game that goes away. It's not. We thought it'd be the Power 4 mandate, and eventually we still think that'll be the case. You may not like that, but I think that's probably going to prove to be the case when you start thinking about the finances of it all. But the reason we had to do it for now is because those Power 4 games are part of the ESPN inventory, that those deals have already been signed. So we have to honor our contract and avoid a breach situation. And then we're going to go to travel to Oxford, and who knows what Ole Miss will look like next year. But so when you start working through this, there's a couple of games you look at and say, hey, that's probably a loss. But how many games on the schedule right now would you say that is absolutely a loss? And maybe Texas may be the one you look at and say, you know what, that's going to be a real tough order. Going to Baton Rouge is always tough, but it's a first-year situation. You don't even know what the quarterback situation is going to look like. And so when you run through this, I don't see it the way many of you do. And I'm not trying to be overly optimistic, but I don't think it's nearly as difficult as what we've had the last 2 years. And again, you never know what a team's going to look like when you go play them. It's just like I think about that Missouri thing. They're down to basically their third-team quarterback, and we lose the game. And the fact that we were not prepared for a run-first situation, you got to put that game. I don't care if you got to put 8-9 in the box. You got to make the young quarterback win the game. You got to make him beat you. You can't let the SEC's leading rusher beat you. That's easier said than done, but those are the things that I think about it. And so I think we learn and we evolve and we get better. And so, we'll see what the year holds for us. But, do I expect the men to be back in the NCAA tournament? I hope so. I can't say here and say with confidence that I expect so. Do I expect the women to make the tournament? Yeah, I do. Don't know how well we do, but I do think we, at this point, are better than we expected. We'll find out in SEC play pretty early what we've got. And finally, Steve, what about baseball? Yeah, I think we're an Omaha team, and I think everybody else does too. And I think we were a team last year, if we'd had maybe one more pitcher for the weekend, that maybe you could prove to be an Omaha team last year. I think the margin between last year and Omaha was actually really thin. And now you think about, we bring in Thomas Valenkas, and you bring in Aiden Teal, and you bring in some of the best players from the University of Virginia to kind of mesh with what we had returning and what we had coming in. Yeah, it's the closest thing to a super team that we're ever going to have, right? And so I expect Brian O'Connor and that staff to do a great job this year. And yes, I do expect to go to Omaha. You never know how things are going to go one weekend, right? And people are like, Steve, that schedule is just brutal. Guys, anybody that has us on their schedule should feel that they got a bad draw, because we're going to be a very good baseball team. We are. I feel very confident in that. And so, again, I think there are a lot of things to look forward to in 2026. I hope that you and your family had a great 2025 and that 2026 is even better. I can promise you there's going to be some big things on the horizon in 2026 for genespage.com, and we'll share more about that when we can. But yeah, we're always looking to do something of significance to try to bring you guys better coverage, more in-depth coverage on a daily basis. And so be prepared for all of that. And so if you haven't done so, visit dutynoblebook.com, and you can get signed copies of all my sports titles. That includes Flim Flam, Stark Villains, Alpha Dogs, Dogpile, The Dude, and the personal memoir, When the Bottom Falls. Sometimes I forget, right? And so, yeah, be sure and check that out. And if you're a person that's in recovery, or you are need to be, or you know somebody that should, that book may be for you, When the Bottom Falls. Visit True Rest Float Spa of Starkville on social media. I think she said she had 26 floaters today. Yeah, busy times. We're very grateful. Thank you. Thank you very much. You've made my wife very happy, obviously, and a thriving business. And it's been wonderful to see so many people benefit from our kind of crazy idea of, you know what, let's go into business for ourselves and let's bring floating to Starkville and see if we can't help people. It's gone well. And so if you're a person that suffers with chronic anxiety or pain, We may be able to help you. We've helped many others. But even if you don't have those afflictions, maybe you just need a break. We can help with that too. Yeah. Dial 662-268-7601 and speak directly to my wife, Dana. She can get you guys on the schedule, answer any questions that you may have about floating. And as always, come join us over at genespage.com. Again, final days with the 50% off special. But until next time, let's all live our lives in a way we make more friends than enemies, and people can see a difference in the way we live.